Hello there and welcome to CGTN special coverage on the BRICS Summit. I'm Li Dongning in Beijing, where the 14th summit of the BRICS group of nations will take place. And the bloc is made up of 5 of the world's emerging economies, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, hence the acronym BRICS. And together, these countries make up nearly half of the world's population and around a quarter of the global economy. And this year's summit is aimed at fostering partnerships within the bloc to ring in a new period for global development. So later, Chinese President Xi Jinping will address the BRICS Business Forum, which comes one day before the official opening ceremony. And she will also host a dialogue on Friday, which will include leaders from member states and also other emerging markets. So first of all, let's learn what's going on the Business Forum. Our reporter Tangbo is joining us live in Beijing for that. Tangbo, hello there. So what have you got for us?
Well, President Xi Jinping is attending the opening ceremony of the BRICS Business Forum in virtual format and will soon deliver a keynote speech. The organizer of the forum, the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, said the forum serves as an open platform for enhancing trade and promoting world economic recovery. According to the Council, more than 1,000 officials, diplomats, and business representatives from 18 countries are participating. Businesses from 13 countries will be engaged. Most business participants are world-renowned enterprises, including 40 of the world's top 500 companies. They cover areas of energy, finance, aviation, manufacturing, transportation, and emerging industries such as big data, e-commerce, and new energy. Now, considering the current world challenges such as rising inflation, COVID, and some regional conflicts, experts believe that business owners and stakeholders worldwide are willing to see this forum as an important open platform to strengthen cooperation and boost global recovery. And on Thursday, President Xi Jinping will host the 14th BRICS Summit in Beijing. The summit will be looking at building a partnership with high quality. And on Friday, President Xi will host a high-level dialogue on global development in Beijing. The dialogue will be held in virtual format as well, which will focus on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and BRICS leaders and leaders of relevant emerging markets and developing countries will attend the event. Back to you.
A lot to anticipate indeed. Thank you very much, Tangbo, reporting from Beijing. And it's been nearly 16 years since BRICS was founded to promote peace, security, development and also cooperation among the 5 major emerging economies of the world. Through the years, it has become more inclusive by giving other developing economies more representation.
The group of major emerging world economies was founded in September 2006 with 4 members: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The strategic cooperation has proposed solutions for developing economies. This became evident as the rest of the world dealt with shockwaves from the global financial meltdown, which began in the US in 2008. The first summit in Yekaterinburg in June 2009 focused on promoting reforms in international financial institutions, including greater representation of emerging markets in these institutions. The 4 nations suggested a new reserve currency to break away from perceived US dominance. The leaders also adopted a joint statement on global food security. In 2010, South Africa was invited to join. A few years later, BRICS expanded representation among a particular region's developing nations. Wherever the BRICS Summit took place, leaders from countries in the region of the host nation were invited for a dialogue. This was known as the BRICS plus N mechanism. In July 2014, at the summit in Fortaleza, Brazil, BRICS held a dialogue with leaders from South America. In 2016, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi noted that BRICS cooperation carries not only expectations from the people of the BRICS countries, but also those from emerging markets and developing countries. So when China held chairmanship in 2017, the dialogue held on the sidelines of the summit was upgraded to BRICS Plus, indicating the inclusion of other developing countries worldwide. The BRICS countries are an influential force in the global economy, accounting for 25% of world economic output in 2021. Since the first summit in 2009, two of its members, India and China, have risen in the rankings of the world's largest economies. As of 2021, India is now the sixth largest and China is second, and it's soon expected to overtake the US. BRICS is a constructive mechanism for developing economies seeking a bigger role in improving global governance and getting their interests heard on the world stage.
And after 16 years, BRICS countries have become an effective cooperation mechanism for emerging markets and developing countries with global influence. But how? Here's an answer.
BRICS, the acronym coined to associate 5 major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has become an economic powerhouse for the entire world. Over the past decade, the BRICS countries have witnessed rapid economic growth and become supersized economies. From 2012 to 2021, the GDP of BRICS countries grew at an average annual rate of 5.1%, 2.1 percentage points higher than the global average. Economic and trade ties among BRICS countries have also become closer. In 2021, the trade in goods among BRICS countries exceeded $500 billion for the first time, a record. Last year, their combined GDP was nearly $24 trillion. That's a quarter of the global economy, significantly higher than the 8% in 2001 when the BRIC acronym first appeared. BRICS now account for a fifth of global goods trade and foreign direct investment. The 5 countries have maintained close cooperation even during the pandemic. Leaders have moved their annual meeting online. In terms of investment, the new development bank has been funding mainly infrastructure projects in BRICS countries since 2014. So far, the NDB has allocated around $30 billion to over 80 projects. The macroeconomic stability of BRICS countries has helped foster global recovery and remained a major growth driver for the global economy.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping is addressing the 14th summit of the BRICS group of nations, and we're going to give you more details about his speech later on. And China actually chairs the BRICS this year, 5 years since the Xiamen summit. We look back on how China has cooperated with BRICS over the past 5 years.
At the 9th BRICS Summit, which China hosted in Xiamen in 2017, President Xi Jinping pointed out that economic cooperation was the foundation of the BRICS mechanism.
经济合作是金砖机制的根基。
With this focus in mind, we should implement the strategy for BRICS economic partnership, institutionalize and substantiate cooperation in various sectors, and continue to enhance this.
That year, China also pledged more than $76 million for a BRICS economic and technology cooperation agenda. In November 2020, in the midst of battling the coronavirus pandemic, the 5 nations reiterated their resolve to jointly address macroeconomic shocks by adopting the BRICS Strategy 2025. The strategy defined guidelines and priorities of cooperation in trade and investment, and embraced digital transformation to raise economic competitiveness. From a 23% share of global economic output in 2017, the BRICS contribution to world GDP has risen to 25% in 2021. The role of the BRICS New Development Bank has gained prominence. Headquartered in Shanghai, the bank has approved about 80 projects. The projects cover sectors ranging from transport to clean energy, such as Putian Pinghai Bay offshore wind power project in China, renewable energy projects in Brazil, and the Mumbai Metro Rail project. In Xiamen 2017, President Xi promoted the concept of the BRICS Plus approach to build an open and diversified network of development partners. In 2021, the BRICS New Development Bank expanded its membership to include the United Arab Emirates, Uruguay, and Bangladesh. In May this year, BRICS foreign ministers invited their counterparts from other emerging market nations, including Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia. As the coronavirus rages due to new variants, China is pushing for long-term research and development in combating COVID-19. In 2021, Chinese biopharmaceutical company Sinovac established a national center as part of the BRICS Vaccine Research and Development Center in an effort to narrow the vaccination gap. In the field of security, the group in 2021 finalized a counterterrorism plan which designated high representatives from each member nation to review implementation of BRICS efforts to combat terrorism. Cooperation in BRICS also extends to people and cultural exchanges.
And for more on the BRICS mechanism, we're now joined in the studio by Mr. Chu Qiang, Assistant Director of International Monetary Institute from Renmin University of China. Professor, welcome to our special coverage. Chinese President Xi Jinping is now addressing the Business Forum right now. We'll have the major highlights later on. He is actually attending this summit, the BRICS Summit, for the 10th time. And this mechanism, as we all know, is aiming on more cooperation, coordination instead of confrontation. So he proposed global development initiative last year at the UN Assembly. How important, how do you think this initiative will help the mechanism of BRICS countries?
Well, I think this is actually a very, very important moment and a very, very important initiative. Just take a look at the whole world over us right now. It's like unilateralism. It's like either you're a friend or a foe. You need to pick side. But there are a lot of countries, third-party countries, they don't want to pick any side because they're far away from all the troubles. They're not confrontational to either side of the world. They just want to develop themselves. President Xi Jinping actually last year has mentioned very, very important ideas. For example, he mentioned about the GDI. In the GDI, he mentioned about several key points. For example, I think it's very good and important takeaway for all of us. The development-oriented. Development should be the priority, not politics, not you need to choose ideologies. You just want to get richer, just want to give your people good quality of life. Just make your country better. That's it, nothing else. It's just a simple idea. And also, he said, the development must be people-oriented. It must be inclusive. Just remember, there used to be a lot of development initiative dominated by the Western countries or other community of nations like that. You always get the string attached. You always like, okay, we need to help the big companies, those too big to fall first. And we need to balance the benefit between all the countries, rich countries, and the big companies. But a lot of people are forgotten, who doesn't have a voice. They need to be representative, the poor people, who consider their benefit. You see, we have lots of campaigns to just save the countries out of the financial crisis before, in 1997, 2008, but guess what? The companies get richer, the stock index get higher, but people are getting poor. We need to think about those people. And also, let's not forget about the environment. We develop in a lot of developing nations. True, they get developed, but in the cost of the natural natures, in the cost of the environment. And all those things need to be included in this new framework, like President Xi Jinping has advocated. And this is something really new. This is really something count out of the perspective of developing nations. It's something worth to be adored and worth to be remembered.
So when we say everyone was born equal, we mean it indeed. And,
exactly.
Our future is shared. That's why Xi Jinping often touts building a community with a shared future for mankind to a solution of global problems. As we all know, we're facing a lot of problems. The Russia-Ukraine crisis and also food and security challenges, etc. So what does that mean? What does this shared future for mankind mean in the context of countries within BRICS Plus framework?
Yes, I think BRICS Plus is a very important mechanism. President Xi Jinping has been thinking about for a very long time, as well as the Chinese government and people. Because I think BRICS is just a fluid concept. We use the name BRICS is because those 5 countries just stand out earlier before, representing the country like them. And now we have more countries like this, Thailand, Arabic countries, a lot of countries, you name it. So I think this framework is actually very important. Do you know why? I think, first of all, I think it's a real equal framework. Well, from the history, we all know all the frameworks and the mechanisms say, oh, we're equal to each other. But there are always some country more equaler than other country. But guess what?
This is an interesting one. What do you mean by equal?
I think from the Marshall Plan.
It's not equal enough right now.
Well, to the NATO, to a lot of countries, African Development Plan. Well, a lot of countries are getting equal. The company get equal. But guess what? China is one of the earliest funder, advocator of the non-alliance campaign, together with India, together with many other countries. So we're equal to each other for sure, and we're all developing nations. Well, just a simple fact. India will not take Chinese order for granted, and China will not just follow Russians' instruction. We're just friends, partners. We're just working with each other in economy, in environment, etc. So it's very equal, no string attached, as I just mentioned. This is really valuable. And secondly, I think it's just a pure cooperation. You don't need to choose sides in the political things. You just focus on the good quality of life for people, how to develop your nation, how to protect your environment. And thirdly, I think this plus framework is valuable is because it's really complementary to each other. In the past, I mean, just after the Second World War, the whole world has only two sides. And for the third-party countries, we're just pushovers. We're really poor. We don't have power, we don't have technology, we don't have financial resources. So we need to pick sides. But right now, we grow up and we can really help each other. China have scientists, Russia has raw materials, Thailand are making lots of car parts, and Vietnam are building electronics. We can help each other. We can really be each other's equal partners. So this really empowered us with a new concept of development. And more than over, this countries, the new BRIC Plus, this whole company of countries, they are a new force. They're bringing more than 70% of the new growth. They've been contributing to more than 50% of the recovery after the pandemic. So I think this is a new era.
So only cooperation can cater everybody's needs, actually. Thank you very much, Professor. We'll continue our discussions later on in the show. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for steering global development into a new era, delivering a keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the BRICS Business Forum. And she also says people's aspirations and the interests of the international community should be main priorities to benefit the people of all countries. All right, let's get back to Professor Chu. Well, we've just got some highlights of President Xi's speech, and he mentioned to cater all nations, all BRICS nations' needs and interests, to defend our own interests by cooperation. So how significant do you think that is?
I mean, as I mentioned, BRICS...
You just mentioned that the expansion of this summit, this mechanism, the BRICS Plus, how many pluses do you think we're going to see?
We're going to see at least more than 13 countries join in, and there are lots of other countries waiting in the list to join in. They've been watching, they tried to observe what's going to happen in this mechanism, because President Xi Jinping has mentioned we need to be action-oriented. We need to be very, very practical. It's not going to be a talk shop. So they're going to wait to see what's going to happen. And I think I'm very excited to see Thailand is trying to get into this framework, and also Arabic countries, Saudi Arabia, for example, and many other more like them. As I mentioned, BRICS country are a concept. The 5 countries in the beginning is just a representative. So more countries like this are going to join the team.
Right, and the world is still reeling from a lot of challenges. for instance, COVID-19 pandemic. So let's get into some more specific areas of cooperation. For instance, public health. How can the BRICS countries help each other on that aspect?
Well, for example, everybody knows fighting against the COVID really needs the COVAX, the vaccines, and also medicines. When America is definitely one of the most important power to bring the whole world about the pandemic services. They have the AstraZeneca, they have the Moderna, some kind of these vaccines. But when they provide it to the country, they're always a string attached. They give you quota, they give you political conditions following that. But China, we don't do that. For example, I have met the ambassador of Egypt last month. He's been thanking China. He said, China has been giving us a whole factory of the vax in Egypt and Cairo with no string attached, just like a normal business investment. And
so
with
the
favorable
factory
conditions.
means not only the products, but also the technology.
The productivities.
The manufacturing as well.
And technologies. Yes, exactly. So we empowered them, not only by tether them with the product, with the condition we have, but we just give them the productivities and the capabilities to help themselves to stand up on their own feet. So this is a bold move, and China has been helping with Iran, China has been helping with ASEAN countries. Lots of moves has been made, and not only China has been helping other countries, I have to say that, a lot of other countries are also helping China. We've been together working with the UAE. They've been working together with Chinese expertise on the COVAX data. We've been collecting data on the patients together, working together on the COVAX. And also with the ASEAN countries, we would try to expand our capacity of production of the COVAX and the medicines. So it's not a one-way street. We've been helping each other in action.
Multifaceted indeed. We'll be getting back to our discussion later on. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping, in his speech, called for joint efforts to seek and safeguard peace against the backdrop of global geopolitical tensions. He said the crisis in Ukraine has again sounded the alarm for humanity. He said countries will surely end up in security hardship if they place blind faith in their positions of strength, expand military alliances, and seek their own safety at the expense of others. Well, the new development bank is a multilateral development bank established by BRICS. And from its first investment, the BRICS new development bank focused on sustainable green companies. One of them is helping reduce CO2 emissions in Shanghai. CGTN's Wang Suwen profiles the bank's first project.
New Development Bank's first loan project in China. Shanghai Lingang Distributed Solar Power Project is running smoothly. It was made possible through a loan from the New Development Bank of more than $33 million.
The Lingang Distributed Solar Power Project involves solar energy generating power from rooftop installations. Well, that's in line with one of the bank's founding goals, to finance sustainable development projects in the BRICS and other emerging markets.
Carried out by Shanghai Lingang Hongbo New Energy Development Company, its solar photovoltaic power station aims to slash carbon emissions by 52,000 tons a year, generating around 65 megawatts of photovoltaic power.
The financing cost is quite favorable, with the lowest interest rate reaching 1.818%. However, now the current interest rate reaches to 2.241%. The low financing interest rate guarantees the smooth operation of the project.
By the end of May 2022, the company says its total power generation has reached about 220 million kilowatt-hour. Shanghai Lingang says this should further reduce carbon dioxide emissions by about 175,000 tons, the equivalent of about 80,000 tons of standard coal. Eliminating the use of that much coal should remove around 6,000 tons of sulfur dioxide and about 3,500 tons of nitrogen oxides from the atmosphere. By Shanghai Lingang estimates, that will save the cost of electricity for photovoltaic users about 8.1 million RMB.
It's already contributing to greening the footprint of Shanghai. We will continue to do more projects in China. The bank has got multiple projects we are currently looking at throughout various provinces in China. Many of these projects, as you might know, we fund with renminbi, with local currency. So the bank will continue to increase its operations in China and all of our member countries.
The BRICS New Development Bank has helped bring green and sustainable development to Shanghai. More projects and investments are expected by the bank in China and in BRICS member countries. Wang Sun, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, for more insight into the BRICS Summit, let's bring in Assistant Professor Ritusha Tiwari from the Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. Welcome to our special coverage, Professor. So we see BRICS countries are increasingly becoming an influential force in the global economy, accounting for nearly a quarter of the world economic output. So how important, in your opinion, is this framework considering current global circumstances?
Well, BRICS allows member countries to negotiate and change the nature of power from traditional militaristic notion to non-traditional people-centric notion of power, bringing them to the forefront of discussion on issues like security, sovereignty, leadership and rights, and therefore the importance of BRICS is underlined in this mandate. Global issues like terrorism, climate change, trade protectionism and others also are within the purview of BRICS, and therefore if we look at BRICS from Southeast Asian countries to the African nations, this particular forum has the potential to act as a bridge for a larger Pan-Asia-Africa cooperation and offers a very important platform for constructive negotiations with the global north for economic development.
Well, since the first summit in 2009, two of its members, India and China, have risen in the rankings of the world's largest economies. And in 2021, India was the sixth largest and China is the second. How can India cooperate with China and also other BRICS countries to gain more say in global markets?
The global center of gravity is moving towards Asia, and India, of course, can be one of the active partners. The key to unleashing the growth potential of India along with other BRICS nations is actually creating a successful and speedier infrastructure as well as upgrading human capital. As was emphasized by the Indian side in the previous BRICS meets, science and technology is a key area where India could be contributing effectively to work towards achieving the rightful place for BRICS in the Global Innovation Index. BRICS countries can together create a pool of innovation, cost-effective, affordable, accessible, sustainable solutions, scientific solutions to many of the similar as well as unique challenges that the world faces at large. India has shown commitment to the strengthening of BRICS in the key sphere of STI, which directly impacts the welfare and progress of all the people in the BRICS nations. When India hosted the BRICS Summit last year, it came up with new initiatives which have been detailed in the last declaration in New Delhi. And BRICS has shown the way to cooperate in terms of even the COVID-19, the response to COVID-19, in terms of the way global access to vaccine was handled by BRICS nations. And the response of most of the BRICS countries in dealing with COVID-19 pandemic has been much better, and in many cases better than even some of the Western countries. So, of course, India remains a very active partner in that particular regard.
Well, this year's summit, Professor, is held against the backdrop of many uncertainties, such as the ongoing Ukraine crisis and also the advent of COVID-19, which caused poverty in the world, especially in South Asia. How can BRICS countries work together in more pragmatic ways to address these challenges?
BRICS continues to maintain that the international system does not recognize the global South's economic and political importance, and the demand for reforms of the international multilateral architecture remains the key political issue for BRICS. The BRICS also allows member states to modulate their geostrategic competition and anxieties within the setting of a smaller grouping even when the bilateral relations of the member countries may remain rocky, even inside the grouping as well as outside. For instance, BRIC can afford its members to the opportunity to decouple their strategic contest from the other dimensions of their relationship. And BRICS countries have largely taken a very neutral stance on Russia-Ukraine conflict, but they have their own nuanced positions in the ongoing imbroglio. They have supported peaceful resolution of the conflict and cessation of the hostilities, but they have been able to largely resist the attempt by the Western powers to align with the narrative of a very unified opposition to, say, one of the member nations, Russia. So it must be noted that BRICS was also one of the first multilateral groupings to come together to respond to COVID pandemic. So the way BRICS nations have risen to collectively respond to the uncertain times that we are facing today is quite exemplary. And if we look at BRICS as a potential as a potential site for collective responses to very uncertain terms in world politics, I think this is one grouping that has been showing its mettle in that sense, without really following the line of maybe rest of the groupings, rest of the international organizations.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Assistant Professor Ritusha Tiwari from the Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. Thank you very much for your insight. Well, in President Xi Jinping's speech addressing the Business Forum of the BRICS Summit, he has also warned of worldwide disasters that could be caused by willful sanctions. And he made the remark in his opening address to this BRICS Business Forum, as we mentioned. He described sanctions as boomerangs and double-edged swords. He said countries who politicize and weaponize the global economy through their dominance will not only harm their targets, but also others and themselves. Well, 10 misunderstandings about BRICS Emerging Market Group are explained in a report released by Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies of Renmin University of China. The report underlines the important role the bloc will play in future global governance. Cao Bing tells us more from Beijing.
A new future for global development. The title of the report sums up how Chinese and international analysts see the growing impact of BRICS, 5 of the world's major emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, in a new report released in Beijing.
The report has listed a total of 10 common misunderstandings about the BRICS and explained why they are wrong. For example, it says that the theories that refer to the bloc as impure and fading are totally incorrect.
Because of economic transition and COVID-19 influence, BRICS shows relatively slower economic growth in recent years. Some trumpeted the theories of the BRICS is fading, but actually in 2021, the GDP of BRICS countries totaled $24.6 trillion, a year-on-year increase of 7.6%, higher than global average growth rate of 5.5%, contributing an important force to the world economic recovery.
The Institute's report debunks Western attacks on the bloc's credibility with theories like BRICS coreless, BRICS empty talk, and BRICS collapse, explaining why they are wrong. The report also identifies 10 new paradigms that BRICS nations have created in global governance, the world economy, and sustainable development. A Brazilian policy analyst said the gathering of BRICS countries are playing an important role amid vast changes, challenges, and uncertainties in the world. The expert also said that a meeting between nations of the Global South could help build a new multipolar international system. The report says it is the system that BRICS countries have pledged to make more inclusive, equitable, and representative, with the aim of building a brighter shared future for the international community. Cao Bing, CGTN, Beijing.
All right, let's get back to Professor Chu Qiang for more insight into all this. First of all, let's explain a bit about these misunderstandings, like the collapse of BRICS, and it is fading. It has a very invalid talks, it's empty talks, etc. why are there such misunderstandings to a mechanism that is aiming for cooperation?
Well, I think most of the reason for that is because for the BRIC countries, we don't have Fox News and CNN. If we have those medias, I make sure everybody will listen to the news every day. Of course, it's a joke. Well, people say this, they're fading. I think it's not true. BRICS countries, as I mentioned, is just a concept. For the countries, for the 5 countries, they have their ups and downs, economic cycles like all the other countries. Sometimes those countries are growing in astonishing speed, so people all watching all this report about those countries. But sometimes when their growths are going back to the normal speed, and then the coverage are not that much. Simple as that. But also, if you consider BRICS is just a concept. Concept means it's not only developing countries, but also independent developing countries with a spirit only to help each other, to just to create a better environment and a good quality of life for their own people, and don't want to choose side. Those kind of country, as a whole, they represent probably more than 70% of the whole world. And some countries have ups and some countries have downs, or vice versa. So sometimes because we have so many countries, not 1 or 2 star countries, get included in the concept. So your attention can be diversified. So it's very, very normal for you just to ignore 1 or 2 stories shining, but also if you take a look at the whole story, all the group of the countries, you will find out, hey, they're doing really great. Like I mentioned, more than 50% of the economic recovery are contributed by those BRICS countries as a whole. And also, in the past 5 years, we've been seeing more than 35% of the world trade and economic growth has been brought by those countries as a whole. So if you take a look at holistic view, and then you will change your mind.
So as an economic expert on finance and economy, so you think that this mechanism of BRICS countries is working effectively, pragmatically, instead of having invalid talks?
Yes, a lot of people say, okay, new development banking.
Can you give us some exact numbers or exact examples of how it works?
I'll give you an example of my family.
Okay.
Last week, I swear to God, it's a real story. Last week, or maybe last 2 weeks, one of my family members gave me a call and said, hey, Chang, can you help me to check out the loan interest rate of the new development bank? I said, what do you need for that in China? And he said, I am applying for the loan to rebuild and renovate a village school in a certain county in the innerland of China, in Shanxi province. And I really want to check the favorable loan interest rate so it can help this village middle school plus primary school to get rebuilt, to help the local kids. I said, really, you can do that? He said, of course. We've been doing that for many, many years. And I know there's a neighboring county has been doing that for a country road to help those villagers to create the capacity to ship out their grains and the fruits and etc. I said, wow, you've been really doing that. Yes, they've been doing that for a very long time. Not only in China, in Myanmar, in Vietnam. If you ask my co-workers in the developing area, you will hear the stories like this are going over and over again. But it's been helping the poor. Who's going to care about the poor? They're not Kim Kardashian. They're not sports star. Nobody give them a coverage. But it's happening and helping people for real.
That's very, very specific and great example indeed. Let's see what President Xi Jinping had just said at the when he was addressing the Business Forum. Chinese President Xi Jinping says countries should stick together in the face of difficulties and join hands for win-win cooperation. He said that some key industrial and supply chains are being intentionally hindered. He said this has caused fluctuating commodity prices, soaring global inflation and volatile markets. It linked to a weakening momentum of economic recovery from COVID-19. He stressed that solidarity and cooperation will help the world overcome its current crisis. Well, Professor Chu, well, of course, again, he just addressed the importance, the significance of cooperating instead of confronting with each other. But I think what impressed me the most is a remark that he just made in his speech a moment ago, he said safeguarding your own interests does not mean you have to do that at the expense of others. And he also raised a serious, very sharp questions nowadays. Where's the world is heading? Peace or war? Development or recession? Open the door or not? Cooperation or confrontation? Do you think BRICS mechanism have all the answers to that?
I do think BRICS countries really bring a new model to the international governance. Well, David Ricardo has to mention that sometimes if everybody act out of their own interest and when it form a network with each other, it's actually been helping everybody else. It's, I think, the classic interpretation of economics. And I think the Western countries have been inventing the concept, but now they've been forgetting about the concept. What's the real problem of the current world right now economically? I think it's we don't have enough effective demand, and we have oversupplies because of the tech progress. But how can we solve this problem? Is war or conflicts try to deprive people from their wealth, or opening up, try to empower your trading partners to nurture the market? Well, China believes that if we can make other countries grow, if we can help other market to thrive, and then everybody is helping each other. I think this is following the basic rules of economics. But if you fight a war against each other, conflict, or create a barrier against each other, you're basically trying to shrink the effective supply and also largely shrink and reduce the effective demand, because war make people poor. War make people close to each other and also fight against each other, and the demand will shrink, or the only demand growth are probably just the defense demand. Other than that, everything's been shrinking. It's not healthy at all. But people like to play the blame games instead of finding the real solution. The BRICS countries is the new force, the third party force. They're not confrontational. They just want to develop themselves, and they don't want to dominate anyone else.
Right.
So according to David Ricardo's policy and their basic rules, when you want to help each other just to create your own utility economically, and then you're helping the whole network, you're helping the customers, you're helping the suppliers as a whole, and all the benefit for all human beings as a community will increase.
It's actually easy to help each other instead of confronting with each other. Confronting with each other can only make things more comprehensive, more difficult, and it's also a difficult thing to do. So why choose more difficult path instead of easier path? All right, we'll be getting back to our discussion a moment later in the show. You're now watching our special coverage on the Business Forum of the BRICS countries, BRICS Summit. We'll be right back.
Five major developing economies meet virtually at a critical juncture as the world is divided over the benefits of globalization. 16 years after forming their partnership, feeling the impacts of the pandemic, BRICS members are seeking greater cooperation to boost their economies. The goals to help steer the changing international order in a more equitable and reasonable trajectory and serve the common interests of the international community. What will this mean for the world economy and global governance? Be sure to watch our special coverage of the 14th BRICS Summit with China as chair and host, only on CGTN.
But this year's BRICS Summit will focus on high-quality partnership and a new era for global development. And the five-country bloc, consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, namely, have already seen over a decade of cooperation. So we look at what the BRICS Plus is.
For the first time in 12 years, BRICS is expanding. The idea of expanding the bloc was raised in 2017, the last time China held the rotating chair.
We should expand the coverage of BRICS cooperation, deliver its benefits to more people,
promote the BRICS Plus cooperation approach, and build an open and diversified network of development partnerships.
People see BRICS as a very attractive bloc, political bloc, economic bloc of formation in the world, and that in itself is something that is positive.
One of the characteristics of the BRICS is that we are large developing countries which face many similar challenges in different ways. So we learn from each other's experience in facing some of these challenges.
The first BRICS Plus foreign ministers meeting was held this May. 9 interested countries from 4 different continents attended the event. Kazakhstan, Indonesia, and Thailand in Asia, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East, Egypt, Nigeria, and Senegal in Africa, and Argentina in Latin America. China's foreign ministry says participating countries agree to promote multilateralism and representativeness of developing countries in global governance, cooperate in the fight against the pandemic, support common development goals, and to build unity of the global South. Egypt is the latest member joining the BRICS financing platform, the New Development Bank, and Argentina is seeking closer development ties with China.
For Argentina, it is a real opportunity to meaningfully participate in a new forum in which emerging economies debate the Global South's agenda, and that is important in terms of foreign policy.
China has proposed standards and procedures for bringing in new BRICS Plus members.
Together, we can blaze a path between innovative, coordinated, green, open, and shared development to inject more positive energy in developing the world economy and promoting cooperation between all countries.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says expansion of membership will increase the influence of BRICS and promote international peace. Wang Hao, CGTN.
Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping says in his speech that economic globalization is an unstoppable historical trend, and those who attempt to block others' development will eventually end up blocking their own. It says economic globalization has faced with obstacles as some countries try to build exclusive yards with high walls. President Xi says the trend has raised common concern that the world economy will be split into isolated blocks. And he also says those who attempt to turn back the wheel of history will only reach a dead end. Let's get back to Professor Chu. Well, the concepts that President Xi just mentioned, that some countries are building exclusive yards with high walls, and this world is actually risking to be separated into isolated blocks. How dangerous do you think that trend is?
I think this trend reminds me of what's been in the early stage of the Cold War. We remember there is a concept called the Iron Curtain. So you're either on this side of the curtain or on the other side. It's very dangerous. It's very unhealthy because a lot of countries like China, like India, like many other ASEAN countries, they don't want to choose side. But they sometimes don't have so much of a choice at that moment of time. Right now, we're going to a very similar kind of a standoff, but this time it's very different. We have a choice. The countries, developing countries, need to work with each other. In the past, we had many trials. For example, after the World War II, we have non-alliance campaign. But this is more like a political purpose campaign. We don't want to choose side. We want to stay independently. And then we have South-South cooperation, but those initiatives is more like economic cooperation with economic agenda, but no political or any other independent purpose. You can still choose side, but we just economically work with each other. But this time for the BRICS Plus, I think it's a combination and evolution of the previous both concepts. It means, first of all, we're developing countries and we're equal to each other. And we don't want to choose sides. We are not going to follow any side's order. We're not going to be a pushovers. We don't need a handout. We need a hands up. And we need to work with each other. And this time we have a choice is because this time we can really help each other. The financial resources from the ASEAN countries, technology from China, raw material from Russia, and the labor forces from maybe African countries. And this time, we do not need to choose side. So this actually empowered the whole concept with new connotation. So that's the reason why the BRICS Plus concept is so important this time, and this can actually work to a new height.
Right, and when you mention the countries, we have another choice of not choosing sides. Are we seeing a lot of friends who would like to do that as well, not choosing sides, just focus on development to defend our own interests? Are we going to see the expansion of friend circles in terms of that?
Well, you do understand we have a metaphor in the business management. We call it a fight between Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. Do you know who dies? I can tell you, it's the brand of another cola you don't know the name. We call it the phenomena of number one fights number two and the third one dies. Because in the past, the history always proved to us that when the two countries, big countries fighting with each other, the third-party countries, the small countries, small economies and markets become the collateral damage. So according to my knowledge, and I've been talking to many friends around the world, they've been telling, hey, we just want a better life. We just want peace and cool. We want to stay away from the troubles. This is never our trouble, not our confrontation. Can we please just to stay in peace and harmony and do some business, and that's all? And now they have a choice. This is called BRICS Plus. And President Xi Jinping have given a beautiful metaphor. He says, mountain Thai or mountain Himalaya get that high is because it never try to, belittle even the smallest rock in the mountain. He try to include all. So become that high and that big. The ocean become that vast because in
every drop of water
will not be missed. So I think this really new metaphor, this new paradigm of development needs every country to stand out and give us a hands up to say boldly and independently, say, hey, we just want to do development. We don't want to side, and we want to join in the club that belongs to our own, and that's it. So that's the reason why at this moment of confrontation, we need such a kind of platform more than ever.
A shared future is a very important ideology of this mechanism.
Exactly.
Indeed. Well, let's get back to the example you just gave me. This impressed me a lot, of your friends seeking help from the New Development Bank. This bank actually, which was, as we all know, set up by the BRICS countries, announced in May this year that from 2022 to 2026, it will provide $30 billion of financial support for member countries. How great help is that? How exactly will it help each country?
Well, I'll just give you one example. Sri Lanka, beautiful country. The Indian Ocean tigers. They have very fast development in probably past 10 years before the pandemic. But right now, everybody knows the friends in Sri Lanka have been suffering from the shortage of energy, food, and they don't have enough foreign reserve. So this is the moment more than ever they need the partners' help. Help them with probably foreign reserve, to help them to purchase enough food, energy, to help them to go over this hardship. But when the international organizations or developed nations aid come to them, they get a lot of string attached. For example, you need to hand over certain controlling rights of your financial ministry, probably central bank, monetary policy. For every sovereignty, this is very, very valuable policy and sovereign right. It's very hard to just give them away. But I think the BRICS countries and their financial organizations, they've been helping them with their long-term perspective. I know this loan's been providing to them, helping to rebuild the infrastructure productivities, purchase, helping the people, not as a handout, not as a charity, nor even more so, nor like a political string attached. It's just a long-term investment, low interest rate. Even though it's a low interest rate, but we believe in the country like Sri Lanka. We used to be them. We used to be poor and deprived like them. But time given to us, we proved that we have the potential. Just take a look at Vietnam, take a look at ASEAN country, all the other ASEAN countries, China itself. We go through that, and every penny and every dollar long-term loan given to China and Vietnam and the other ASEAN countries proven to be a worthy investment. And that's the logic between our help.
Well, looking ahead, we are certainly now facing a lot of challenges and uncertainties, and looking ahead, maybe more, perhaps, uncertainties. So how do you think, under these circumstances, that BRICS mechanism or framework can work smoothly?
Well, nothing can work smoothly in the given circumstance. we hope, well, fingers are crossed, we hope it can move smoothly. There are going to be a lot of suspicions. There's going to be a lot of theory of conspiracy. There are going to be, of course, lots of huge interference from other parties, for sure. We never expect this is going to be a smooth drive. But it will go forward because for so long, the whole world only had one logical development. It's either this ideology or that ideology. But do we ever consider maybe there are some more diversified ideologies, ideas, or thinking for development? Thailand had their way of development. Myanmar have their own development. African countries have their own development. China has its own way. And Timor-Leste has its own way. Maybe it's not who is right, who is more universal. Maybe there is a possibility that all we can be right. All we can be right. We need just to learn from each other and to share with each other our own beauty and learn what you can take.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Chu Qiang from Renmin University. Thank you very much for insight into the BRICS mechanism. And with that, we come to the end of our special coverage on the Business Forum of the BRICS Summit. President Xi Jinping just made a speech addressing this forum, stressing on cooperation instead of confrontation. All right, I'm Li Dongning in Beijing, and stay tuned with CGTN.